morning. Thank you for the introduction. So usually I'm talking about road safety and seat belts, distracted driving, and many of the issues we're seeing out there are causing our crashes and our fatality crashes. But this morning I'm going to talk a little bit of something different, some of the new laws that are out there. We get a lot of calls about some of the stuff that came out of the last legislative session. So I spoke with Ellen. I said, let's talk about some of the new laws that come out. It's an issue, especially when it comes to Mexico CDL. So we're going to touch base on a few of those new laws that came out of this past legislative session. That was the 88th legislative session. We'll jump right into it. So everything that came out, let me jump slides real quick. I'm working. Okay. Everything that came out is effective immediately. November, we're sitting here, so everything's been in effect for 2 months. September 1st is when it went into effect. Everything except for the inspection. So many people have heard about the inspection going away for your vehicles. That is correct, but that's not immediate. Everything else, all laws are effective September 1st unless otherwise noted. The elimination of the state inspection, that takes place January 1st, 2025. And if you look here in red, there's 17 counties that it does not affect as far as the emission standards. So if you live in Brazoria, Collin, Dallas, Denton, etc., you're still going to have emissions testing on your vehicles. Now, I know most people here in the Permian Basin, they work here and they go back to the Dallas area, DFW. So if your vehicles are registered, a little higher, if your vehicles are registered in those counties, they will still be required to have emissions testing. Now, there's a $7.50 fee that's still going to be collected. The state of Texas is not going to give up their $7.50. Think about that, the amount of vehicles on our road, that money's not going away. So it's just going to be added to your registration fee when you pay for that registration. Here's a big one affecting the Permian Basin. This is going to be tampering with the government record. Everybody's familiar with the sand haulers, correct? Yeah, everybody knows they're kind of a shady business in the way that some of them operate. So many of the sand haulers obtain a 72-hour or 144-hour permit because they do not register those trucks. And then they counterfeit that permit continuously once it expires. That has now become a Class A misdemeanor. So the legislature has put some teeth into that law for us. So if you know anybody who's doing this, or if you have a company that leases onto you, or a sub of a sub that's doing this, we need to get that education out there because it is now a Class A misdemeanor to tamper with that document. And that applies to 72-hour permits, 144-hour, one trip, 30-day, dealer temporary tags, buyer's tags, any type of tampering with that registration permit. We'll jump over to the move over, slow down law. Now this has been in effect since about 2003, and we still have first responders, TxDOT, tow truck companies that get hit out there. And this is another big issue I talk about when I go and do a safety presentation. Think about it as if it was your wife on the side of the road. Would you want somebody to move over and give her that lane if she was out there with a flat tire and you were on your way to come change it? Or some good Samaritan had stopped to change her tire? Of course you would. Let's put that same courtesy towards law enforcement, towards our tow truck drivers, towards our utility workers, towards TxDOT, towards our EMS, towards anyone who's out there with those flashing lights on or their hazard lights. Let's move over. The law has more teeth to it now. The first offense is a fine of $500 to $1,250. A second or subsequent offense is 5 years. Within 5 years, will carry a fine of $1,000 to $2,000. Now here's the big one. A second or subsequent conviction for slow down and move over law allows the court to suspend the person's license for a period of not to exceed 6 months. So there's a lot of teeth in this law now because we keep getting our first responders hit out there. So please move over when you see those lights. And that's blue lights, red lights, blue and yellow, which is TxDOT, yellow and blue, which is going to be your record drivers, or yellow and white. We need to move over out there, please. The next one is reckless driving. This one got some teeth put to it also. The new law requires peace officers to impound vehicles in the commission of racing or exhibition of racing or exhibition of speed. This combats some of the street takeovers that you've seen, like if you've been watching Fox News. I know Fox News is probably the only one that talks about some of the stuff that goes on in our major cities, but if you look at like Austin, they've had some street takeovers where they shut down an intersection, they start doing donuts, they start drifting, they start racing. We've had some issues, and even in Odessa, of this occurring. Law enforcement now has the ability to tow that vehicle. It's no longer released to a parent or released to a friend. That is now immediately towed by state law. So we get that race car off the road for that night. Failure to identify. Here's another new law. This is Senate Bill 1551. As many of you are familiar, there are people who do not respect the laws or do not respect the authority of the government of any level, whether that's state government, local government, or the feds. Most of these people are Republic of Texas type folks that believe they don't have to have registration on a vehicle, they don't have to have a driver's license, they don't have to have insurance. So when law enforcement would make contact with them, they would not identify themselves to law enforcement because they were not driving, they were traveling, as they would say. And they're allowed to travel under some article interpretation of some article of confederation years ago. Now, that used to be somewhat of a gray area as far as how to handle that. It is a Class C misdemeanor now if a person operates a motor vehicle and is detained by a peace officer for alleged violation of law and fails to display a driver's license or refuses to give their name or date of birth, identifying information, driver's license, residence, anything like that. If they give a false or fictitious name, that is now a Class B misdemeanor. So we got some teeth to that law also. That came out of the legislature this past session. We'll talk about pedestrians. You would think this would be a no-brainer. Pedestrians should walk on the sidewalk, correct? Well, it's an issue out here. Right now in Midland, I believe there's been 4 pedestrian crashes just inside the city of Midland this year. Fatalities. That doesn't mean people just getting hit. That's fatalities inside the city of Midland. I know DPS has worked several. There's a case in Reagan County right now. We're asking for the public's help where a man was struck and the vehicle left. The man was walking along the edge of the road and he was struck. Now, did the person see him? I don't know. Did they think they hit something else? I don't know. But we need to get these pedestrians walking on the correct side of the road, walking on the sidewalk, and that's what this law is for. If a sidewalk is provided, pedestrians walk along the highway are required to utilize the sidewalk. If a sidewalk is not provided, a pedestrian walking along or on the highway is required to walk on the left side of the road or shoulder facing oncoming traffic. So there's one out right there. If you're out there walking, you need to be walking towards traffic, facing traffic if there's not a sidewalk provided. We'll jump on to the next one. Whoop. There we go. Variable speed limits. Now here's a big one that's coming out. And we're coming up on the time of the year where we start getting some stuff falling out of the sky, right? Get a little bit of rain, a little bit of snow. And what do people do? Anybody? Do they slow down? No. Because we drive 75 or 80, whatever the white sign says, come hell or high water in West Texas, right? That's pretty much the way it is. If you're out there as a first responder and there's a half-inch of ice on I-20, people will still drive 75 miles an hour. Although there's a dozen cars within a mile stretch flipped over, people will still drive 75 miles an hour. So TxDOT now has the ability to put a variable speed limit sign out there. Electronic speed limit sign, I believe, is what they're looking at. I know Eric can speak more on that. But it's a temporary speed limit sign to lower the speed limit due to inclement weather, congestion, road construction, or any other condition affecting traffic safety. The lower speed limit will be based on engineering and traffic investigation, may be displayed on a stationary portable sign. So when the speed limit should be reduced, because there's a half-inch of ice on I-20, this is what we're going to utilize, because we can't get people to slow down. That's where we are in society. We can't get folks to slow down. So now, instead of 75, it may be 30, or 35 is a safe speed limit, or 25, depending on whatever those roadway conditions are. Advance next slide, please. Okay, give us 1 second here. This clicker's not reaching, and give them 1 second here. We're going to talk about passing and passing as if there's a difference, but there is a difference. We'll jump into that one. Just give us 1 second. Okay, go to the next slide. There we go, passing. Whoop, back up one. Here we go, passing. So is there a difference between pass and passing? There is. So how many times you've been at an intersection, and we'll pick on, let's say 1788 and 158 in Midland. Everybody kind of familiar with that is? There's a Kent Quick right there, a big American flag, and there's a four-way stop sign. And traffic backs up there at about 4:30 till about 7. It starts backing up. And people need to make a left turn or a right turn, but predominantly people are making a right turn to go run down to 1788 and jump on 1788. So traffic is backed up, and there's like 15 or 20 cars in line. And what does somebody do? Somebody will jump out and run all the way down the shoulder to make a right-hand turn. And the same thing happens at, like, say, County Road 300 and State Highway 302 in Mentone. You see it in lots of places. In the past, whenever a collision occurred, it was kind of a gray area as to who was at fault. Was it against the law to do that? That has now been addressed under House Bill 3126. Some changes to the definition of pass and passing. So if we look at the red right here, to clarify the definition of pass or passing by adding return to the original lane of travel to meet the definition of pass or passing. A driver must return or intend to return to the original lane of travel. This creates a difference between passing and driving past vehicles. So that's where we are as far as trying to address this issue. Yep, now we're clicking. So if you look right here, and I'm going to demonstrate here on the screen to my left. Let's see here. Back up. If you look right here, you got this little blue car that's in line, and you've got about 12 vehicles right there. And that's what I'm talking about. That blue car is going to hop out of line and drive down the improved shoulder to make a right-hand turn. So where were the collisions happening? Other vehicles would hop out of line to do the same thing and cause a collision. People would open their doors to cause a collision. Rocks would come up. They would chip windshields as they flew past everybody, especially welders. Anybody seen a welder do this before? Yeah, there's some people laughing, yeah. Yeah, welders drive like they got one foot in the grave and the other on a banana peel. That's the way they drive. So if we look over here to the left, that is now against the law because you had no intent to return to the lane of travel. You are not passing, you are driving past vehicles. That fixes that. You're no longer passing because you no longer intend to return to the original lane of traffic. That is against the law. So if you see people doing it, if you get videos from your company and you're looking at videos of your drivers and they set off an alert and you see your drivers doing that on in-car video or forward-facing cameras, you need to address that issue because it is now against the law. Yes, sir, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Say you're going with traffic. They're not stopping things. You scoot over without traffic as you're going to turn.
Yes, so it is still legal to drive on the improved shoulder. Now, some folks have said, is it legal to drive on the improved shoulder? Did y'all just take that away? We did not take that away. We took it away, the state took it away, the ability for someone to pass people and never return to the lane. You can still pull over onto the improved shoulder to allow faster moving vehicles to pass you. You can still pull onto the improved shoulder to slow down to make a right-hand turn if you're immediately going to make a right-hand turn. But if you're going to use the shoulder to go past 8, 10, 12 vehicles in line, that is now against the law. And that's where that was taken. That's what this law was trying to address is this issue right here. Go ahead, sir. A bicycle lane? Bicycle lanes to be utilized for bicycles only. Yes. Yeah, you see the bicycle lanes in Midland. I'll use Bluebird, for example. If anybody's familiar with Bluebird near Butler Park in Midland, you see people use the bicycle lane to turn into Butler Park when there's a soccer game or a t-ball or whatever's going on. I know my son plays baseball at that park. You see people do it all the time. The bicycle lane is for bicycles. If you run over somebody in the bicycle lane, guess who shouldn't be in the lane? The car. The bicycle lane is for the bicycles, not for a car to utilize the bicycle lane to advance in traffic. Any other questions on this issue? All right. Oh, excuse me, go ahead, I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah, that's illegal. That's what this addresses also. So you cannot utilize the shoulder to advance in traffic because you intend not to return back to that lane or to run down the interstate like they're going to go down to the next exit, or they're going to hop across the grass area because it's backed up. That's another thing we see. Cutting across the median or cutting across a divided section of the highway to avoid turnoff is also against the law. So if you see anybody doing that, that's been the law for some period of time. Yes, sir, go ahead. Yeah, so you mean like slowing down to turn into a cattle guard or something like that you're talking about? It's like if they're slowing down to turn into a lease road or a cattle guard, they're pulling on the shoulder and they're slowing down, like, say 200 feet or an intersection? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, we do work crashes in those incidents, and that's where it is important to be sure that when you're making that right-hand turn, that you're doing so safely, fail to turn right safely. You're also making that turn as close to the edge of the roadway as possible. So it does create some instances where, it is difficult to investigate. But that's something you got to look at on a case-by-case basis. Mm-hmm.
Or is that
Yeah.
fault?
That's going to be a case where the investigator is going to have to look and see who was on the shoulder at what point, where were they slowing down at, were they passing or not passing, did the person have a turn signal on? That's going to be a case-by-case basis. Those are very difficult crashes to work, and that's something the investigator is going to have to look at on a case-by-case basis. Yeah, it's not something I can answer right here without, this is going to be looked at on a case-by-case basis as far as where they're at on the roadway, because those are difficult crashes to work.
Sarge threw us an audible there, and we didn't have the mic ready to go. We're taking Q&A from the floor during his presentation,
Yes.
which is really great. Thank you about that,
No
Sarge.
problem at all.
Appreciate that. But we got it now. Here's it. Mr. Robert, go ahead.
So would that apply also to people driving down the middle of the median to go, you'll see them driving and they'll go down the median just to pass all that traffic to turn into like a business or so. Would that apply the same there too?
Yes, you're like, for instance, on 42nd Street in Odessa, where they used as a merging lane or to shoot down. No, that's not what that is for. That is for to pull into and make a left-hand turn. You cannot advance yourself all the way down the middle of like 42nd Street to make a left-hand turn into a business. Yeah, that's to slow down. You pull in there, you stop, and you make your turn. And the same thing, you see folks using it to merge also. So they'll pull out, like trying to cross 42nd Street, they'll pull out and make a left-hand turn, and they'll use that as like a merge lane. They'll run all the way down it for a period of time and then merge into traffic. That is also not what it's utilized for.
Anything else on this particular topic?
Yes, because I do have Mexico CDLs, and I know I'm going to get some questions on it, and I am running out of time, so I don't want to take anybody else's time up. Okay, we'll jump over to lane splitting. If you see motorcycles lane splitting, that used to be a kind of a gray area also when it came to the law. Now under House Bill 4122, that is against the law to lane split. You would think that would be common sense, running down between traffic, especially stop traffic on the interstate, but motorcycles were doing it, crashes were occurring, and now law enforcement has some teeth to enforce this law. And that is House Bill 4122. Also, speaking about motorcycles are allowed to ride two abreast. But now you may not ride more than two abreast in a single lane. So if you ride a motorcycle, we get questions on that occasionally. How far or how many people can we put in a lane, or can we ride 3 or 4 abreast in a lane? That is incorrect. The state law is 2 on that. That is a common question that we do get. All right, we'll jump over to Mexico CDLs. So this is House Bill 4337. I still get about 3 to 4 phone calls a week on this issue right here. Is anybody here familiar with the Mexico CDL issue? There's a few hands that went up. Okay. So Mexico CDLs are not legal here in the state of Texas unless they have a work permit, to put it in a nutshell. So if you had Mexico CDL drivers who were up here driving from Mexico and they did not have a valid work permit, they can no longer drive. They are now placed out of service. And we'll jump into that a little bit more. So if you look at the red here, the standards for license reciprocity were not changed. However, a person must be authorized under federal law to work in the United States in order to be covered by this reciprocity. If an out-of-country CDL holder is not authorized to work in the United States under federal law, they may only operate a commercial vehicle in a county that borders Mexico. Obviously, the Permian Basin does not border Mexico. That's going to be Valverde County, El Paso County, places like that. That border where they come in, they drop their load, and they go directly back. If they do not have that right to work permit, or work visa, as they're called, they can no longer drive here. And I know that was hit hard. I know the sand industry called a lot on that. So did the water transport industry. We're employing a lot of drivers with Mexico CDLs. And like I said, once again, it's still a big hot topic. We still get several questions on it. So the Mexico CDL format. The format is now digital. If anybody's coming in to apply for a job and they're giving you a plastic CDL and it has an issuance date after April 1st, 2021, that is a fake CDL, and they are out there. So I had a phone call from an insurance company in Midland. They said, we represent a company as a client, and their drivers are coming in with an international driver's license that says international license valid in all countries. Is that legal? No. They were buying that for $500 somewhere. So once again, you have people taking advantage of these folks, making money, selling them a product that is not valid. So you do have that going on out there. And you do have fake and fraudulent CDLs being made, once again, taking advantage of folks. And also folks trying to circumvent the law. So the Mexico Federal Digital Driver's License rules went into effect on April 1st, 2021. That license has to be digital. This is the old format. Check the license for issuance date. Remember, before April 1st, 2021. So if somebody comes into your company trying to get a job and they give you one of these, you need to look at that driver's license. It's valid typically up to 5 years. This is the new format. It went into effect April 1st, 2021, like I stated. The paper copy is valid for 30 days. They could reprint that paper copy as many times as they need to as long as that license is valid. This is what that paper copy looks like if they come into your company. This is what we see roadside most of the time. It's a digital copy that's going to be on their phone. They can have a digital copy on their phone, and that is legal. And once again, that went into effect April 1st, 2021. Employment authorization, also referred to as a work visa or work permit. I have April 1st, 2001 on there. I need to correct that. This is what we're talking about by authorization for employment. This is what your authorization form or work visa or work permit that the driver calls looks like, issued by the federal government. So when our troopers do a roadside inspection and a driver presents them a Mexico CDL, this is what we're asking for next. If they do not have that, then we're going to check it through the system. If it's not there, the driver's going to be placed out of service. So let me throw one out there for you. If you have drivers that have a regular Texas Class C driver's license, meaning they are domiciled here in Texas, they live in Odessa, and they cannot pass the CDL test here in Texas. So what do? They go to Mexico, right? And they go get the Mexico driver's license. Is that valid? No. They are living here, domiciled here in Texas. They are required to have a Texas CDL. It's another thing we see with Florida. So if you have Florida drivers that bring you a Florida non-CDL as an identification card and a Mexico CDL as their CDL driver's license, is that legal? No. They're required to have a Florida CDL because they are domiciled living in Florida. Or if they're now living here, they're required to have a Texas CDL. We've also seen this with green cards where they're a permanent resident and they still have a Mexico CDL. They're a permanent resident of the United States, but they still have a Mexico CDL. This is to combat all those issues we're seeing. That's what the legislature finally put the teeth into this law. It's done away with all those. So if you have Mexico CDLs in your company, you need to scrutinize those very carefully, because once those drivers are put out of service out there on the roadway, what does that do to your company? It puts points. And the more points you get on your profile, the more your insurance costs. And it's costing your company money. Are there any questions on Mexico CDLs?
Any question?
Any questions?
Hi, because we got a lot of folks in here, and I want to
Okay.
make sure you get
And if you do have questions later on, I'll be back in the back if you want to talk on that, because I know that's, like I said, I still get 2 to 3 phone calls a week on it.
If they're placed out of service at that time, I understand they're not being charged. Are they being placed into custody for transportation back to Mexico? What's happening to our units?
No, so the Department of Public Safety does not enforce immigration laws as far as arresting someone on an immigration status. So what we're doing is placing them out of service only. So we're not going to leave somebody out in the middle of nowhere. We're going to escort that vehicle to the Love's truck stop, Pilot truck stop, or we're going to call the company to bring out a licensed driver that has a proper CDL. Or if we cannot do one of those two, we can also have the option of towing the vehicle.
So sorry, you had a follow-up.
Yeah. So what is happening to the driver at that time?
The driver is being released with a citation, most likely. But of course, that's up to the discretion of the trooper, but most likely a citation for no CDL and then placed out of service and the vehicle is parked. Immigration status? I mean, yeah, we have the ability to, but I mean, I'm not going to stay here. I'm not going to stand up here and lie to you. You know, the Border Patrol is very busy right now. Yeah, the Border Patrol is very busy. So getting a Border Patrol person here in Texas is, I mean, here in Midland, Odessa area is pretty slim. That driver's going to be placed out of service. So I know there's some rumors going around that DPS is arresting those people and taking them to jail. That is not true. DPS is not doing that. They are placing them out of service, parking the vehicles or towing the vehicles. That is happening. Go ahead.
You know, my first question is how many of these laws that you guys are getting now is mandatory court appearance, or is it all done by paper?
So whenever a ticket is issued, that is a mandatory court appearance. That is a mandatory appearance for that, mandatory requirement for that person to appear before Justice of the Peace. That's where we write our tickets, at Justice of the Peace Court. Now, Justice of the Peace can set how you make contact. Sometimes a phone call is all that's needed for their court. That's up to the judge. Sometimes they want that person to appear in person. That's up to the judge. But anytime a citation is issued, that is a mandatory court appearance.
And the second part of that is, we all know that law enforcement's out there chipping away and trying to fix it, but when it gets to the courts, they're a lot more lenient and they're not backing you guys the way they should. Are you still having that kind of conditions going on out there while you're working?
As far as to my knowledge, all the Justice of the Peace offices here in the Permian Basin have been very supportive of this law. I have not had any information that they're not enforcing this or anything like that. And once again, that's up to the court system. For law enforcement, we file the charges. What happens in the court system happens. That's once it goes to the court system, it's out of our hands. Now, as the public, remember, those are elected officials. Justice of the Peace is an elected official. Your district attorney is an elected official. If they're not holding their standard of the law, that's up for the citizens to take that up. And when it comes time to vote, that's not for law enforcement to handle. Does that sum it up? All right. Thank you all very much. Like I said, if there are any additional questions, I'll be around. Please feel free to get with me. And once again, here's my email address. I'm out there a lot. I'm in the schools. I'm out with the companies multiple times a week, every morning, doing safety meetings, covering a variety of topics, whether that's distracted driving, speed, seat belt. Those are the big ones causing our crashes right now. And of course, alcohol is always an issue. If you need someone to come speak to your drivers to kind of put them in line, as some folks would say, I'm here for that. Please reach out. The resources of the department are available to the whole community of West Texas. We're all here for the same mission, to end the streak, to go one day without a fatality on our roadways in the Permian Basin. So please put those seatbelts on. We're sitting at 95 fatalities in the Permian Basin right now. We're hoping to keep it under 112, which is what our number was last year. We're hoping to make it there. Thank you all very much. You've been a great audience.